Judas, would you betray the human one with a kiss? When those around him recognized what was about to happen, they said, Lord, should we fight with our swords? One of them struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. Jesus responded, stop, no more of this. He touched the slave's ear and healed him. Then Jesus said to the chief priests, the officers of the temple guard, and the elders who had come to get him, have you come with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a thief? Day after day I was with you in the temple, but this is your time when darkness rules. After they arrested Jesus, they led him away and brought him to the high priest's house. Peter followed from a distance. When they lit a fire and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant woman saw him sitting in the firelight. She stared at him and said, you are one of them. This man was with him too. But Peter denied it, saying, woman, I don't know him. A little while later, someone else saw him and said, you are one of them too. But Peter said, man, I'm not. An hour or so later, someone else insisted, this man must have been with him because he's a Galilean too. Peter responded, man, I don't know what you're talking about. At that very moment, while he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. And Peter remembered the Lord's words, before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And Peter went out and cried uncontrollably. The men who were holding Jesus in custody taunted him while they beat him. They blindfolded him and asked him repeatedly, prophesy, who hit you? Insulting him, they said many other horrible things against him. As morning came, the elders of the people, both chief priests and legal experts, came together, and Jesus was brought before their council. They said, if you are the Christ, tell us. He answered, if I tell you, you won't believe. And if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the human one will be seated on the right side. The human one will be seated on the right side of on God's right side. Human one will be seated on God's right side. But from now on, the human one, you will see the human one coming on a power. I kind of forget. Sorry, I didn't want to get run over there. If I told you, you won't believe, and if I ask you a question, you won't answer. But from now on, the human one will be seated on the right side of the power of God. They all said, are you God's son then? He replied, you say that I am. Then they said, why do we need further testimony? We've heard it from his own lips. The whole assembly got up and led Jesus to Pilate and began to accuse him. They said, we have found this man misleading our people, opposing the payment of taxes to Caesar, and claiming that he is the Christ, a king. Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Jesus replied, that's what you say. Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, I find no legal basis for action against this man. But they objected strenuously, saying, he agitates the people with his teaching throughout Judea, starting from Galilee all the way here. Hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that he was from Herod's district, Pilate sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. Herod was very glad to see Jesus, for he had heard about Jesus and had wanted to see him. For quite some time, he was hoping to see Jesus perform some sign. Herod questioned Jesus at length, but Jesus didn't respond to him. The chief priests and the legal experts were there, fiercely accusing Jesus. Herod and his soldiers treated Jesus with contempt. Herod mocked him by dressing Jesus up in elegant clothes and sending him back to Pilate. Pilate and Herod became friends with each other that day. Before this, they had been enemies. When Pilate called together the chief priests and the rulers of the people, he said to them, "You brought this man before me as one who is misleading the people. I've questioned him in your presence and found nothing in this man's conduct that provides a legal basis for the charges you have brought against him. Neither did Herod, because Herod returned him to us. He's done nothing that deserves death, therefore I'll have him whipped and let him go." But with one voice they shouted, "Away with this man, release Barabbas to us." Barabbas had been thrown into prison because of a riot that had occurred in the city and for murder. Pilate addressed them again because he wanted to release Jesus. They kept shouting out, "Crucify him, crucify him." For the third time, Pilate said to them, "Why? What wrong has he done? He's done nothing. I found no legal basis for the death penalty in this case. Therefore, I will have him whipped and let him go." But they were adamant, shouting their demand that Jesus be crucified. Their voices won out. Pilate issued his decision to grant their request. He released the one they asked for, who had been thrown into prison because of a riot and murder, but he handed Jesus over to their will.